Hello again, Space Apps crew, and thank you so much for joining us for the first ever opening ceremony for Space Apps. We're so excited to have you, and we're glad that you could watch and hopefully learn from a number of the reminders and tips that people had to offer through this opening ceremony. If you're looking for more information, just visit spaceappschallenge.org, and in particular, our resources section where you can find the participant FAQ and a number of other resources that might help you with the things that you've learned about in this opening ceremony. We're also looking forward to not only hearing about the projects that you create through your Space Apps Weekend experience, but also about seeing what you have to share throughout the weekend. We'd encourage you to use #SpaceApps on social media to share photos and videos as you work with your team to create your projects and as you take part in a Space Apps event, an annual Space Apps event like no other. Thank you so much for being part of this community, and as a reminder, in the spirit of this year's theme, take action.
Si tuviera un tip para los participantes de este challenge, sería que se permitan como equipo transformar las ideas.
My one piece of advice for Space Apps participants would be to have a diverse team. Don't just team up with people that are like you. The power is having people that have different ideas and different skill sets that can complement your own. That's probably the biggest success factor for our team that year.
Hello hackers, my name is Pedro Dantas. I'm from Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. I'm part of the Cafeína team, the 2019 winner. And I wish you the best in this year challenge, and I hope to help you in some way. See you.
My advice is, keep your presentation engaging and simple, and make sure you have enough time to submit your project. Good luck!
Como recomendación, les puedo decir que definan muy bien los roles y las tareas que cada uno de los miembros va a realizar.
Space Apps is all about learning, collaborating, and exploring. So find a way to share your excitement for the discoveries you've made while hacking on your challenge. And don't forget to spend some time working on a great final presentation. Thanks and good luck.
I love music, and I love to merge my interest with the hackathon. I would suggest you to merge whatever interest you have with the hackathon challenge.
If I have one piece of advice for Space Apps participants, it is to cast the net wide at the beginning, but don't be afraid to throw away good ideas if a better one comes along.
Good luck!
My advice to you is try to make a deep appropriation of the problem, knowing pretty well its action field and its subjects involved.
I love mixing machine learning and robotics in all my Space Apps projects. My advice to you would be NASA Space Apps is not all about software. Don't be afraid to add hardware and robotics into your projects as well. Thank you.
This hackathon is about coding as much as it's about new ideas. So bring forth your amazing ideas.
If I had one piece of advice for Space Apps participants, it's keep an open mind and never doubt yourself.
If you are young, don't think that you have less ability. You have all the potential to outshine others.
My advice for Space Apps participants: form teams with people from different areas and have good ideas.
Si tuviera que darles una recomendación a los participantes del Space Apps, sería que armen equipos de perfiles diversos y diferentes puntos de vista. Esto le agrega muchísima integridad a la propuesta.
And if I have one piece of advice for the Space Apps participants, it is to ask as many people as you can, and these people will ask you questions that you've never asked yourself before and make you see other sides of the problem.
People from all sorts of background participate in this hackathon, and that makes the solution even more awesome. So why not you and your team give it a try?
If I have one piece of advice for Space Apps participants, it is to assign tasks strategically in the team, according to their skill or knowledge. For example, we had assigned the design task for Claro, programming for Nino, data search for Patricio, and mathematical justification for me. Regardless of the fact that each one had a main task, we still helped each other to reach as a team the result at the end of the challenge. Good luck!
My advice to you guys is to stick to your project's main goal or objective and never let noise cloud your vision.
If I could share one piece of advice with you, it would be to find something that inspires you and stick with it.
Hello, everyone, and for all the participants in McLean, Virginia, registered for this year's NASA Space Apps Challenge for McLean, Virginia. Now we're going to start discussing some of the rules for our competition this year. But before we do so, we will have our first keynote speaker, Dr. Diana Burley, give us a keynote presentation. Dr. Diana Burley is a Vice Provost for Research at American University, where she is also Professor of Public Administration and Policy and Professor of Information Technology and Analytics. Named one of Ksc Magazine's 8 Women in IT Security to Watch and the 2014 Cybersecurity Educator of the Year. Dr. Burley regularly advises global executives on how to balance risk and strengthen cybersecurity posture. She managed a multi-million-dollar computer science education and research portfolio for the National Science Foundation and has written nearly 100 publications. Before joining American University in July, Dr. Burley was a professor at George Washington University, where she directed a 26-member research consortium focusing on strengthening the cyber infrastructure of the US. She holds a BA in economics from the Catholic University of America, MS in public management and policy, MS in Organization Science, and a PhD in Organization Science and Information Technology from Carnegie Mellon University, where she studied as a Woodrow Wilson Foundation Fellow. Dr. Burley recently testified before U.S. House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology Subcommittee on Space and Aeronautics on Cybersecurity at NASA and emerging issues for increased telework during COVID-19. Today, she will share some of these insights with us.
Hello, I am Diana Burley, Vice Provost for Research at American University, and I am delighted to be with you here at the 2020 Space Apps Challenge. I can't think of any better place to be on the second day of Cybersecurity Awareness Month than right here with a group of individuals who have dedicated themselves to taking action. Taking action is especially important in this year as we struggle through the global pandemic, the economic crisis, the racial insecurities and injustices that we are seeing and facing across the world and certainly here in the United States. We need individuals with creative minds and innovative spirits to take action. But taking action in the same way, in the way that we have done before, is not good enough. And that's one of the reasons why hackathons like this one are so incredibly important. And the work that you're doing is so vital to our ability to advance, not just for NASA, not just for space exploration, but how we can leverage the tools that you are using today as you move through your hackathon experience to actually inform and change and grow society. Your work, your efforts, your inspiration are incredibly important to the future of our society, and I hope that you know that. I hope that as you go through your hackathon experience, that you will put in not just the dedication and hard work that it takes to move through these challenges, because I know you will do that. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want to do that. But I hope you will approach your tasks from a different perspective. I like to think about turning the box upside down and thinking through how can we approach this challenge from another angle. Part of what allows us to do that is when we have diversity of mind, thought, spirit, and team. So I encourage you to think about how someone different than you will be able to add to your ability to evolve a solution that will enable you to develop something new, to grow to greater heights and challenge the status quo of what has been done before. In cybersecurity, we don't often think about the destination because the destination is somewhat amorphous. You're never going to have a completely secure system. But what we think about is how can we use the various factors that we have at our disposal to assess the risk, to look at the landscape and determine what factors do we need to think through and how can we reduce our risk posture and understand the threat environment a bit better. And how can we, to the best of our ability, leverage the resources that we have? Sometimes those resources are technical, sometimes those resources are financial, and sometimes those resources are human. But the question is always, how can we bring together all of these different factors to enable us to advance the security of our system as far as we can? That's really the same challenge that you have. How can you leverage the different resources that you have at your disposal, the individuals on your team, the tools that you are using, to come up with new and better ideas, new and better solutions for the challenges that NASA has put before you? And then the next challenge is, how can you leverage those solutions to make the world a better place? And when I say the world, I don't just mean Earth, because as everyone at NASA is focused on Earth and beyond, when we think about our collective world, we want to think through how can we leverage the solutions and the resources that we have in order to make our society, our world better. Now, this isn't to say that those with the most resources, whether they are financial or human, that those with the most resources are in the best place to succeed. Because really, and this is the essence of the types of activities that you will be engaged in, it's about leveraging what you have, innovating off of what you have, and thinking about new and unique ways to approach the challenge. I was fortunate to give a talk only a couple of days ago where I spoke with small businesses who were looking and thinking about their own cybersecurity posture and trying to understand what they could do, especially in light of the fact that their resources were severely limited. They didn't have dedicated cybersecurity staff members. They didn't have a great deal of financial resources to buy the latest and greatest technology. And frankly, they didn't have all the information that they thought they needed either. And so the question was, how can we, who are limited in resources, still develop and strengthen our cybersecurity posture? And so we talked about different ways of approaching the challenge, defining the challenge in a very specific way, making sure that as you think through the definition of that challenge, that you are compartmentalizing, breaking down pieces so that you can think about how to impact each individual piece, thinking about partnerships and collaborations. Now, I recognize that in this case, you're all working in teams, but you have a team. And so thinking through how you collaborate with the members of your team and leverage the expertise of those individual members is a critically important component for success. You don't want a team that all looks the same and has the same skill set, because that can make your solution set very narrow. But having a team that is diverse of mind and spirit and experience is having a team that is strength, because that individual who may not have the strengths where you have them has other strengths and can fulfill your weaknesses and help to build out a robust team. So you want to think about how you can collaborate, how you can turn the problem upside down and think about it in a different way, and how you can learn how to redefine different aspects of the problem such that you are able to attack pieces of it. Because once you get those bite-sized pieces and you begin to tick off all of the different things that you can do, you then end up with a much smaller problem set that you have to think through. What do you do next? And that is often a much more feasible challenge to try to solve. So I just want to applaud you for your efforts and activities. I think that joining a hackathon of this nature, particularly in the environment that we're in, shows the resilience of not just the NASA Space Apps Challenge, but also the resilience of all of those who are participating in it. And I applaud you for standing up and stepping out and saying that we are going to continue with this important work. It shows that you are ready to innovate and leverage the creativity that you all have in order to really break down the barriers and challenge accepted thought patterns and move us all forward. I can't wait to hear about the ideas that you come up with and the solutions that you present. I know that they are going to be innovative, creative, and impactful. And I encourage you to continue to work together, work collaboratively in order to address higher needs, goals that are higher than yourselves and goals that are higher than those that have been put before you or perhaps that you can see right now. We often come across challenges and problems that we've never seen before in life. And so events like this, where you're presented with something new, are opportunities for you to grow and develop and prepare yourselves for the future ahead. Again, it is a pleasure to be with you and to have had an opportunity to give just brief remarks to you. This is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and I hope that you will take a moment to both think through how you can strengthen your own cybersecurity posture, but also how you can help someone else, whether it is a sister or a brother or a parent or someone at work or someone at school. We all need to be reminded of the basic things that help to keep us safe: good cyber hygiene practice, using strong passwords, not sharing information on passwords, not clicking on links from people that you don't know, checking email addresses. All of these very basic cyber hygiene practices only help to strengthen both your cybersecurity posture and those around. So again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you some remarks this morning. I will be engaged in the chat so that if you have questions, please send them to me and I'll be happy to share them. We at American University are very invested in not just the future of our students, but the future of society. We have 4 overarching strategic areas of emphasis: security, social equity, healthcare, and data analytics. And we want to be sure that we leverage the collective research of all of those members of our community to help grow and strengthen our society. Congratulations to you for being a part of the Space Apps Challenge, and I look forward to hearing about your future successes.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to some of the general information towards what is the NASA International Space Apps Challenge for 2020. On October 2nd through 4th, NASA is inviting coders, entrepreneurs, scientists, designers, storytellers, makers, builders, artists, and technologists to come together in a global virtual hackathon. During a period of 48 hours, participants from around the world will come together to create virtual teams and solve challenges using NASA's open source data. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic and in interest of our global community's health and safety, this year's hackathon will be an all-virtual event. Our theme for this year's event, Take Action, is a critical reminder that you can make a difference, even from the comfort and safety of home. Space Apps, which started in 2012, has now become the largest global hackathon. While NASA provides awards to the top projects, Space Apps is all about collaboration. Our mission is focused on the following objectives: to inspire collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking, to foster interest in Earth and space science and exploration, to raise awareness of NASA data around the world, to encourage growth and diversity of the next generation of scientists, technologists, designers, engineers, artists, and more. Space Apps is for everyone. This includes those who have never hacked before. All passionate problem solvers are encouraged to join. students, experts, engineers, makers, artists, and storytellers. While some of our challenges are technical, others ask you to use your artistic skill, your business acumen, and your historical imaginations. In other words, you do not need to be a coder or data expert to be part of SpaceX. In fact, the most diverse teams are often the most successful. Visit the resources page on the Space Apps website for a comprehensive guides on how to access and use the chat platform, how to find and create teams, what to expect for project submission, judging, awards, and more. Also, tag the Space Apps community on social media such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram with the tag #SpaceApps. And let us know how your Space Apps journey is going. There's also a virtual bootcamp that was created prior to the hackathon weekend by NASA local leads, Space Apps ambassadors, previous global winners, and more. Guests will provide relevant workshops and tips for having a successful hackathon experience. This is a wonderful opportunity to tap into the broader Space Apps community. Participant registration for Space Apps 2020 will open on August 14th and extend through the end of the hackathon on October 4th, 2020. Registration for Space Apps requires that you sign up for a Space Apps account and then register for a location. You will not be able to participate in the hackathon until you have registered for a location. If you do not already have a Space Apps account, please create one from the login sign up page or select register now on one of the location pages. If you do have a Space Apps account, you can log in and select choose location from the user dashboard. Or you can register through the location page shown in this slide. Everyone can change their location in the user dashboard after creating an account. You can unregister yourself from the specific locations page and then re-register on any other page. Or you can select a new location from the user dashboard by selecting change location. An individual is allowed to work and submit a project independently. However, we encourage all attendees to be part of a team. We have found that the most successful solutions come from teams of individuals with diverse skill sets and backgrounds. If a participant comes from a non-technical background, we encourage them to connect with developers, designers, and people with scientific backgrounds to form a team. The sweet spot for teams is typically 4 to 5 people. The limit for a team is 6 people. If a team gets too big, it can be difficult for the team to focus. If it is too small, the team may not have all the skills or knowledge needed to solve a challenge. You can collaborate with other members of the hackathon through the Rocket Chat on the Space Apps website, on the location page. In a few minutes, we will move on to our next keynote speaker for today, Dr. Andrew Aldrin. Dr. Andrew Aldrin is president of the Aldrin Family Foundation, a charitable 501c3 organization dedicated to harnessing the inspiration of space to ignite a passion for STEAM education in students of all ages and backgrounds. He has served in leadership roles in educational programs to over 300 elementary schools and universities. Dr. Aldrin is also the director of the ISU Center for Space Entrepreneurship at Florida Tech and an associate professor of engineering management at Florida Tech. Before moving into academia, Dr. Aldrin had a distinguished career in industry and government research, including executive positions at Boeing, United Launch Alliance, and Moon Express. Dr. Aldrin was also a member of the research staff at the RAND Corporation and the Institute for Defense Analyses. He serves on the board of several charitable organizations, including the Secure World Foundation, Sea Space Symposium, and the Tau Zero Foundation. He holds a PhD from UCLA in political science, an MBA from Trium NYU LSE Tech, and an MA from George Washington University in Science, Technology, and Public Policy. After a few minutes, Dr. Andrew Aldrin will give his keynote presentation.
Akshan. Hello?
Yes, hello, sir.
I'm here.
That's fantastic. Feel
Okay.
free to get started whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay. So if everybody's ready now, we'll just go. Let's see. Let's do this. All right, we should be live here, right?
Yes, I can confirm that we can see your screen.
You can see my screen. Okay. All right, everybody. Listen, I'm really proud to be here. This is a great honor for me. I think I wish I could be there with you to kind of exchange ideas and see what you all do. You know, what I thought I would do today is talk about commercial space, and because there's a lot going on, and I think, you know, for all of you out there, hang on just a second. I'm going to adjust my lighting here because I see. All right, that'll be better. The sun was shining through my shades right into my eyeballs. So roughly what's the age group here is sort of young adults, I guess, all of you? Okay, so you are at a really, really special point in time. There are things going on today in space that I think are just truly exceptional. And you have opportunities that I certainly never had growing up myself. And I think you also have challenges because you're growing up in a very challenging environment in space. Things are going to be happening very fast. But, you know, if it's anything from any one of you out there could easily be the first person to step on Mars. Any one of you out there could end up having a job working in space. Any one of you out there could have a job working on the moon. Any one of you out there could actually go build a spacecraft. I mean, it used to cost decades and billions of dollars to build a spacecraft. You can now do it literally in months for thousands of dollars. So the opportunities are just incredible, but the uncertainty is incredible as well. And so what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about, you know, my experience being in space for, you know, literally 50 years now, I guess you could say. I've been in space in one way, shape, form, or another, and talk about some of the changes that have happened over time. And I call this an agnostic view because I'm kind of looking at whether or not we're really looking at a revolution in space. And I think maybe we are, but I'm not sure. And we'll talk about that at the end of my talk. There are things that I think need to happen. But it's also entirely possible, and we've seen this happen several times before, that the wave's never going to break, and we really aren't going to have a revolution in space. And it's important that you all understand what is happening, what's not happening, and the kinds of things that maybe you need to do to encourage it to happen, because we all want it to happen this time. But it's also important to understand that we've done this before, at least 2 times. So let me start by, I think, talking a little bit about, you know, kind of the long, strange trip I've been on, because if you look at my career, and I have students that I talk to and people that I mentor who say, you know, I want to do what you're doing, which I question, but my career isn't normal. And so, you know, obviously it started when my dad went to the moon. And people look at that and they go, well, isn't that great? You know, your dad goes to the moon and now you're kind of following in his footsteps. Well, if I followed in his footsteps, it was a really circuitous. You know, I started out life, professional life, if you will, as a Sovietologist. I wanted to study the Soviet Union. I wanted to understand why the Soviet Union, how the Soviet Union beat the United States into space. And it's a fascinating story that I'm going to talk about. And so I did that for a long time at the Rand Corporation. And then, well, the Soviet Union went away. And so I came up with another career. It turned out that, you know, I had been showing a lot of people around the Soviet Union and then later Russia. And aerospace companies came to me and said, well, maybe you're interested in working with us on international business development. So I went to work for TRW, and then I ended up working for Boeing, where I was, I ran business development strategy and advanced programs for their NASA business, and then did the same thing when we thought the launch business was really going to be where exploration was headed. And then we took our launch business at Boeing and merged it with Lockheed's launch business for ULA, which was a really interesting experience. And I did basically the same thing there. And then went off to run a company called Moon Express, and we were building a spacecraft to go to the moon. And then when I left that job, I was pretty much going to retire. And what ended up happening is I got involved in two things. That one was running the Aldrin Family Foundation. And so Akshan mentioned some of the things that we've been doing there, and it's a lot of great things. Basically, we're taking the excitement of space and bringing it into schools. And so we've got programs where you do exploration of Mars, do exploration and development of the moon. And it's, mostly grades 3 through 8 or 9. We're actually working on some really cool stuff to roll out in the high school level. But the other thing is the Center for Space Entrepreneurship, and that's something I'm really passionate about. And it's because I really see that we do a great job in our nation, and in fact internationally we train great engineers, we train great business people, we train great policy people, but we don't give them the integrated skills that they really need to be successful in today's world. Because in today's world, everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. Whether you're inside a company, whether you're in government, whether you're in academia, or whether you're running your own company or working in a company, you have to be a lot more entrepreneurial than you were before. And so what we're doing at the center is talking about how you integrate all of those skills. And I'll talk about that at the very end of this. But first, I want to talk about where it all started for me personally, professionally, but I think more importantly, where space really started. This is a guy who I think was the original space entrepreneur. I still think to this day, perhaps one of the greatest space entrepreneurs. And guess what? He's not an American. He's not even a German. He's a Russian. This is Sergey Korliov. And Korliov was a brilliant man who literally came from the gulags, from the prison camps of the Soviet Union, and ended up creating what is most of the Russian program today, and it certainly was the driving force behind how the Russians beat us into space. And it was a story of entrepreneurship. This was not a story of leadership from the Soviet political leadership, sort of saying, we want to go beat the United States into space. In fact, the political leadership was almost clueless about this kind of stuff. They certainly weren't supporting it. And just to illustrate that point, this is Korliov's main customer, at Marshall Malinowski. And so this is the guy who's supposed to be supporting him with creating the rocket troops. And this is what Malinowski had to say about Korliov and his rockets. He said, you want 2 tons of alcohol for your rockets. You take that alcohol, you can't even hit a city next door. Give me that 2 tons of alcohol and my troops will take over any city. I mean, that's a classic sort of Russian attitude, Russian statement, but it certainly isn't political support. So Korliov created it in spite of the political leadership. Now, one of the things that's really important about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship is, sure, entrepreneurs create great products. They make inventions. Entrepreneurs make lots of money, although lots of entrepreneurs are social entrepreneurs that aren't making any money. I mean, arguably, I'm creating academic programs, and that's entrepreneurship, and it certainly isn't making a lot of money. But the fundamental thing that entrepreneurs do that differentiates them from investors, from inventors, is they create organizations. And this was Korliov's genius. He created an organization in the Soviet Union in the mid to late 40s, which spanned across 6 different ministries. And in the Soviet system, it's basically a command economy, totalitarian system. Everything went from the top down. Everything went from the top down. And the idea of cooperation across ministries was virtually unthinkable. And so this organization, which was an informal organization, it didn't exist designers, and it was literally people that engineers, scientists, most of whom weren't even actually running their organization. In fact, Korliov himself wasn't even running his organization. He just ran a department within a research institute. But these guys worked together across the Ministry of Naval Production, Ministry of Artillery, Ministry of Aviation, Ministry of Electronics, and worked together informally in a way that frankly, the political leadership didn't really know about. And this was the key to their success. So, you know, when you think about entrepreneurship and you think about commercial space, it's important to understand that perhaps the key thing that entrepreneurs do is create organizations. Now, I want to talk about another organization that I guess I had a little bit of experience with, maybe indirectly, growing up. And so this is just a shot from Mission Control during the Apollo program. And you know, the Apollo program, in spite of the fact that they had 400,000 people working for it, I call it, you know, maybe one of the first great space startups, because it actually behaved like a startup organization. And I'll tell you, there's a great story. There's a guy named John Hubble, Langley Research Center. Hubble was an engineer. He wasn't even like a senior manager or anything like that. And Hubble had a different idea for how to go to the moon. Now, von Braun, the great von Braun, and I'm not questioning, in fact, in some ways this illustrates the greatness of von Braun, had a very different concept. He was going to send up two huge rockets, a rendezvous in Earth orbit, and then send another huge rocket to go to the moon. Same rocket would land on the moon, and the rocket would take off of the moon and come back. Hubble said, no, what you really need to do is you need to send smaller things, and you go to the moon, and you do all your rendezvous at the moon. And he could do it with one single rocket that was smaller than von Braun's two rockets. And the amazing thing is, you know, this is a guy coming from the bottom of NASA, going to literally the very top of NASA, and convincing the guy that's running NASA that he's got a better idea. And that is an entrepreneurial startup mentality. I don't have to tell you how challenging that notion would be in NASA today. If any of you out there are in NASA, I think you understand just how difficult it would be for something like that to happen. So that's another important part about entrepreneurship and startup mentalities. Now, what I want to kind of spend most of my time talking about are, you know, since I teach at Florida Tech and we're right next to Cocoa Beach, which is the home of Kelly Slater, undoubtedly the world's greatest surfer ever, we're going to talk about waves. That's our metaphor for the day. And so we're going to talk about waves of commercialization. And today we're experiencing a wave of commercialization, there's no doubt. But this isn't the first time. We experienced it once in the 80s with the shuttle, and that was kind of a flat wave that just never broke. I mean, things were going on underneath the surface of the water, but it was just kind of the wave that never broke. And then in the late 90s and 2000s, we got the wave that wiped us out. And this is a fascinating and interesting, a cautionary tale that we all need to remember, because we've done this before. We had, you know, a huge wave of commercialization, a tremendous amount of support, thousands of satellites being built, and it all just crushed us. And that was not great. And so here we are today. You know, this looks like the wave we're tubed. You know, we're going to either have the ride of our lives here, or we're going to get wiped out. And I don't know. So we're going to talk a little bit about these three waves. So the first one, the wave that never broke, 1980 to 1995. It's an important time because, you know, this is, you know, the ideas of Gerard O'Neill were really popular during this time. And this is pictures from famous movies some of you have seen, I hope, 2001. And so, you know, you've got a space plane in there that says Pan Am on it. You know, Pan Am's not even in business anymore. But then you have the you had the space habitat that's straight out of Gerard O'Neill. This thing's a massive structure that's rotating to create artificial gravity. And we were thinking very actively about cities in space, and nobody was talking about government in space. This was all about, commercial development of space. And we were going to take the space shuttle and we were going to commercialize the space shuttle. And, when we first built the space shuttle, we thought we were going to take out a piece of paper and write down how much you think we thought the space shuttle was going to cost for a flight and show it to somebody nearby. All right, you got your number, show it to somebody. We thought we were going to build space shuttles and launch them for $7 million a piece. At the end of the day, the number was a lot closer to $1 billion per launch. $1 billion per launch instead of 7 million. We kind of missed the mark on that one. There were other things that were kind of cool and interesting happening at that time. We actually had the first privately funded and built rocket. Conestoga was suborbital, but it was a first. And so this was kind of incredible. In fact, one of the really cool things that came out of this whole process, even though we didn't end up with a lot of commercial programs coming out of this, we did end up with some government regulation. When Conestoga was launched, there was no government regulation. And so, one of the guys that was involved in it said, okay, so we got ready to launch and we said, we're going to launch. And the government said, well, you need a license for that. And they said, okay, what license? And the government said, we got to think about that one. You need an export license. And so that's what they did. They had an export license. But what it led to was the Commercial Space Launch Act, which is fundamental enabling legislation to this day. And so that was a really good thing that came out. Ultimately, the whole thing ended, and it ended tragically. It ended tragically with the Challenger mishap. And from that point on, the whole commercialization had been based on the notion, really, that the shuttle was going to provide the foundation for it. And because we're going to have $7 million shuttle launches, it was going to be easy to get to space, and it was all going to be great. And that all changed with the Challenger accident, and the notion of even using Challenger anymore for commercial launches disappeared. And it was tragic, But it's important to understand that we did this, and at this point in time, you don't think about it, but if you go back and look in the 80s, in the Reagan administration, particularly in the first term of the Reagan administration, there was a tremendous amount of support for commercialization, and it went away. And so that was really unfortunate, but this is kind of the world we live in. So then let's get to the next wave that just wiped us out, and it crushed us. And it's an interesting story, as I said before. So you go back 1995 or so, we're literally going to darken the sky with spacecraft. You've got Teledesic that's talking about building at one point there, I think at 940 spacecraft. You've got other constellations like Celestri that are launching tens, if not hundreds, of spacecraft. Iridium, Global Star are both going to put about 80 to 100. Skybridge, I think, was right around 100 spacecraft. We're going to darken the sky with spacecraft. And it's, those numbers of 1,500 are really low. 100 billion of planned investment is probably really low. But you got to love the launch guys, because, I've spent a lot of time in the launch industry. We'll never miss a mythical market. And so there are 13 different, major launch vehicle development programs. Most of these actually got to the stage of kind of building some kind of hardware. And so there was a lot of activity there. What happened? Well, it kind of hit, there was the internet bubble. There was a financial crash. There was huge devaluation of the stock market. And what ended up happening is, instead of 1,500, we ended up with 130 spacecraft, 10 billion of solid investment. So between Iridium at about 5 billion, Global Star at maybe 3 to 4 billion, Orbcomm $1 billion or $2 billion, there was $10 billion worth of real assets that were built. been launched and put into space. Out of the 13, we ended up with 2, we'll call it 2.5 launch vehicle programs. You got Sea Launch, Atlas, and Delta, and Sea Launch was sort of a little bit of a hybrid anyway. Okay, but that's not bad. You know, that you could call that a process of creative destruction where the market sort of weeded out what was good and what was bad, but we're not done. We're not done. All of these guys go into bankruptcy. So Iridium went bankrupt. It was sold off for $25 million. Global Star was reorganized. Like it actually went through Chapter 11. Orbcomm was sold off for pennies on the dollar. Literally, so you got $10 billion of capital expenditures, $10 billion. That's sold in bankruptcy or whatever transactions came out of it for a total of $80 million. So there's an old story, at least when I was growing up, it wasn't such an old story in space that if you want to make a small fortune in space, start with a large one. This is crazy though. This is just absolutely crazy. Launch programs, Atlas and Delta didn't go bankrupt, but they were reorganized. The whole contract was changed completely, and Boeing and Lockheed ended up writing down billions and billions of dollars. I was at Boeing at the time. Fortunately, this is before I was on the launch side of the business, so I experienced the pain indirectly, believe me. Anyway, so this was a tough time. It was a tough time, and it really changed a lot of the perspectives on commercial space. And while you still had some self-financing companies like Bigelow and SpaceX pop up in the next few years, it was a tough market to try and get any kind of space investment for a really long time. And I think we're just now today starting to see kind of reorientation of the basic kind of mindset about space. This is a quote from Paul Nesbitt, who was, one of the rock star analysts. We had this really bizarre financial system at the time where you had analysts who were making tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars off of deals that they were analyzing. And that's a little bit of a conflict of interest. Fortunately, that kind of stuff has changed. But at any rate, guys like Nesbitt were really shaping the investment climate, and it made it really, really tough in the future for these kinds of businesses. Businesses like space hardware in particular. Okay, so where are we today? Like I said, this is either a really good wave or a really bad wave. I don't surf, never did, but I know what waves look like because I grew up around them all of the time in California or in Florida. So this guy's going to have a good day or a bad day, and we don't know. So here we are. It's a new space race. The question, and this is one of the things that we deal with in our program at the Center for Space Entrepreneurship, is are we looking at a paradigm shift or not? And it's a tough question. And there are kind of, if you step back and you get theoretical, there are kind of two ways of looking at it. One is Stephen Jay Gould and the concept of punctuated equilibrium, which says, the concept was that you had the dinosaurs were cruising along and everything was going well, and the dinosaurs were having a good time running the earth. And then there was a huge cataclysmic meteorite impact, and it changed the climate, and the dinosaurs died. And the basic theory is that things will move along in a more or less regular pace until something comes out externally and jolts the system. And maybe that's what's going on today. And, you got to like this particular theoretical perspective because it's got dinosaurs and it's got small furry mammals. And, a lot of my friends have pointed out that, in my career, which as I said earlier, I've kind of gone all over the place from being a Sovietologist to an academic to an executive to a president of a startup, and now I'm an academic again. I didn't so much change jobs or even careers, but I literally changed life form. My friends say I've gone from being a dinosaur, Boeing and ULA, to a small furry mammal trying to create a commercial space revolution. And I like that. But from a theoretical standpoint, I actually don't think it's a great theory for what we're talking about. The theoretical perspective I really like, and if any of you kind of want to get into understanding how things change, I think Thomas Kuhn and his structure of scientific revolutions is a really useful way of looking at it. And what Kuhn says is that science, and in this case, technologies, are not just hardware and thought and papers and that kind of stuff. Fundamentally, it's all about people, and it's a social process. And there's a social process paradigm change, which he looks at scientific revolutions, the Newtonian revolution, Darwinian revolution, things like this, and sees a pattern. Well, that pattern seems to hold in the case of some industrial revolutions, and it seems to hold very much in the case of what seems to be happening today. And it's one of the things that kind of makes me think maybe there really is something going on. There's a pattern here that's a repeatable social pattern that suggests maybe things really are changing. And so the basic theory is a technology or a science moves along, and it's kind of, you know, chugging along, launching missions, whatever, solving puzzles is what Kuhn calls it. And then all of a sudden it gets jammed up. Things don't happen and they don't work. And then something comes along to say, hey, there's a different answer, there's a better way of doing it. And then all of a sudden, either you get others within this community of scientists, technologists, companies following this new solution or not. And I think maybe we see this pattern right now. And it starts with this. This is kind of the life that I grew up in space. And I didn't do this chart. No one actually, for different times, 5 or 6 different people claim ownership of it. I've never really confirmed. I think I know who did it, but he hasn't admitted it yet. Every one of these red bars that you see on this chart is a program that was canceled. Big programs. The X-33, the X-34, the crew return vehicle. These are, massive. In theory, they were going to be multi-billion-dollar programs. I mean, these were going to be the future of space transportation, of human spaceflight. And they were canceled. And so as I'm kind of, these are the years. So I think I went to TRW in like 98, and then I was at Boeing in 2000. So these are the years where I'm kind of in my aerospace career, and every program that gets started gets canceled for a whole variety of reasons. I think it's interesting to really understand why all of these programs got killed. And so for those of us in the community, it was getting kind of depressing. And then what happens? Then SpaceX comes along. Now, as a guy who worked in ULA, and in fact, one of my primary jobs was trying to compete with SpaceX. I had healthy skepticism towards SpaceX, and I have to admit, while I am technically amazed at what they're doing, and they continually confound all of us, I still have some questions about just financially, some things about the firm. But what SpaceX did is they've demonstrated that there's an entirely new way of doing business. And it's not just, they're vertically organized. It's a completely different organizational approach. They approach contracts differently. They approach working with the government differently. They approach risk massively differently. And they are becoming successful. I mean, they really are. They have utterly changed the space industry right now. And so this is, I think, to go back to Thomas Kuhn's approach, this is the kind of thing that you look for to say, hey, if there's a better way of doing business, are people going to follow that? And they are, for the most part. for the most part. So one of the things about today that's really different than 20 years ago is you have a lot of very high net worth people who are really dedicated to this proposition of space exploration, habitation, changing space. I mean, changing space in really fundamental ways. You talk about people like Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, Elon Musk, they absolutely want to change space. And certainly Bob Bigelow down there at the bottom, he's actually there talking to my dad. But not all of them. I mean, Google kind of got out of space, and Paul Allen tragically died. And you know, when Allen died, his company didn't completely die. It's in the process of being reorganized, but it does show the downside of having very high profile, very, very wealthy people starting companies is if they go away for whatever reason, that can kind of leave a hole. But still, we have some dedicated leadership on the commercial side in space that makes a big, big difference. The other thing is we have lots of companies coming in. This is just a tiny little thing that I did. It's a couple of years old at this point. But, you know, Space Angels has recorded, I think we're over 500 new companies that have been started. There are 130 companies building small launch vehicles. We're actually doing a study at Florida Tech on the small launch industry and on the constellation industry emergence. And it's incredible, the number of companies. So, you know, there are lots and lots of companies that are kind of coming up behind that are demonstrating maybe if this new paradigm does work. But a lot of them are going bankrupt too. So there's huge attrition, which is kind of what you expect at the early stage of this kind of a change, at the early stage of industry emergence. There are some things that are a little unhealthy, but so I mean, look at this is from Space Angels, and now you've got over here you've got cumulative firms, and you've got over 500 firms, total of $25 billion investment in space over the past 10 years, which sounds good. But remember, right, NASA's got a $25 billion budget every year, and the DoD and NRO, National Security Community, have at least that much on their side. So this $25 billion isn't a huge amount of money, but there's a lot of growth there. There's a lot of growth there. And I don't have a chart, I think, on the $1 trillion space economy, because I have to say that this is another area that I was kind of skeptical until I really started digging into it. And, you know, it depends on how you count things, but there is a very credible story that within 20 years, the space economy will be $1 trillion. Chad Anderson at Space Angels thinks it's there today. And, you know, he kind of a different way of counting things. Nevertheless, $1 trillion is a big chunk, you know, which that's 5% of the US economy. And so space is really, there's a lot that's happening here, and it's happening fast. And one of the things that I kind of find encouraging is that, well, I definitely find it encouraging, is that we have a much more balanced capital structure to where investment is coming from today. You know, you've got lots of people that are getting late stage investment, balance across the different seeds. If you look at the different kinds of investment, you know, between venture capital, debt, and private equity, you know, you've got companies like Fidelity Investments investing in space. And so that's really, really different from what we saw in the late 90s, and that's encouraging. That's encouraging. There are, however, some signs which worry me a little bit. And so I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't, you know, if I didn't play the part of the space curmudgeon just a little bit. But so this is actually a chart from the 2018 Space Angels report. And it's, you know, this is a good news story. You got $3.9 billion spread across 112 deals. That seems like a lot of stuff going on across a lot of different countries. But if you look at it, there are some imbalances that concern me. And so the first is, you know, this is a good news story. You got $3.9 billion spread across 112 deals. That seems like a lot of stuff going on across a lot of different countries. But if you look at it, there's some imbalances that concern me. And so the first is, you know, this is a good news story. You got $3.9 billion spread across 112 deals. That seems like a lot of stuff going on across a lot of different countries. But if you look at it, there's some imbalances that concern me. almost all this investment in 2018. It's getting better now. There's a lot more UK investment in 2019, but that was mostly because of one company, OneWeb. US really focused, which is great if you're in the US, but if what you're looking for is the emergence of a global industry, you'd like to see more balance to it. And to be sure, one of the trends we've seen over the last few years is a lot of investment in China, which presents some of its own challenges, because it certainly does present part of a challenge to the US in terms of the economic challenge. And there's a lot of discussion, to be sure, about Chinese motives and whether the Chinese are playing fair and all that kind of stuff. And, that's a separate discussion. But in general, I think the greater balance there is across different countries, I think the more robust the industry is going to be. And it's particularly problematic in space for any of you who are not US nationals. Understand how difficult it is to work in space if you're not a naturalized US citizen. So I would like to see more of that, more balance to it. The other thing that you see is of this, I think almost $2 billion of the investment came from Jeff Bezos. So it's a little distorted because it's coming from one person. And so, again, you'd rather see more things coming from more diverse sources of capital. If Jeff Bezos ever gets hit by a truck, the space industry the commercial space revolution is in jeopardy, right? So take care of Jeff. And then the other thing is, for somebody who spent, I don't know, probably close to 10 years in the launch industry, launch is a tough business. And when I see 130 companies building small launchers, it's really hard to believe that many of those companies are going to be able to survive in that business. And so I'd like to see more balance. I think there's some super, super exciting segments in space. I think the most exciting one, which really doesn't show up very much yet, is going to be taking data from remote sensing platforms in space and through whatever aggregators there are sort of at meso levels of aggregation. But the real magic is going to happen as people come up with applications that are going to be merging data that's coming from optical satellites, from hyperspectral satellites, from radar imaging, electronic imaging. Internet of Things is a huge data source. And you start to pull these things together, and people are going to come up with products that are going to do amazing things. But I'll tell you what the key is. The key is getting as close to the customer as you can. I honestly think that satellite people coming out of wherever, Houston, Silicon Valley, you pick your tech hub, are going to have a difficult time connecting with farmers in Nebraska or whoever the end customer is. And so I think there's going to be lots of room for dynamism in that interface between customers who don't care whether the data comes from space or through gravity waves. All they want is information that they can use to run their business better. But the people that are able to figure out how to pull together all of these incredibly diverse sources of data, and probably using an awful lot of AI to make it happen, that's where the magic is going to be. I mean, that's where the $1 trillion economy is really going to happen. And we're just starting to scratch the surface of that particular area. Last thing I want to touch on is, and this is really getting kind of eco-geeky, but look, you're all out there doing a hackathon, and I'll tell you that that a technology without a customer and without an economic basis, a business case to it, is literally playing technological solitaire. It can be great fun, but ultimately it's not nearly as satisfying as winning a game of poker. One of the things that concerns me a lot is I see valuations of companies that are just economically unsustainable. And sure, it's great if you're an investor in that company and you own some piece of SpaceX at 33 billion. I think it's now up to 40 billion. But at the end of the day, economic gravity always wins. And at some point, your valuation has to match the actual cash flow, the discounted cash flow. Everything, anything in between the cash flow and your valuation is hope. And I had a boss who used to tell me hope isn't a strategy. He was wrong. It is a strategy. It just tends not to be a very good one. So anyway, what I want to talk about is just go through an example of an overvaluation, what I think is an overvaluation. And I'm not picking on any company. However, I will say that these numbers absolutely match companies that are out there. And so we're going to call it RocketWorks. And they got the Phantom launch vehicle. And we're going to say we're launching 300 kilograms to sun-synchronous orbit. And our baseline is 50 launches a year at $5 million a launch. I think our profit margins are 20%, which are obscene. In the launch business, you're doing incredibly well if you can generate operating margins of 10%, incredibly well. In fact, you're doing well enough. There's literally, let's just put it this way, there are very few launch companies that have been profitable. So if you take that baseline and you start saying, all right, let's look at some cases and let's look at what the net present value is there in the right-hand column and compare that with the valuation of $1 billion. And so if you basically look at the normal case and you say the discount rate reflects a risk return, and you say, all right, we're launching 50 times a year and we make $1 million a launch because we're doing 20% operating margins. We have a net present value of $266 million. That's way short of $1 billion. So if you now say, you know what, we're going to call this investment absolutely risk-free. It's like you're buying treasury bonds. Even then, you get, at which, by the way, the launch in the venture capital business, 10% discount rate isn't going to get you there. You really need more like 20% to even think about it. 1% gets you to about $400 million, not even close there. If what you do is you say, all right, let's just say we're risk-free and we double our launch rate to 100 launches a year, you're getting towards $1 billion, but you're still only $765 million. And if you quadruple the revenue and then go back up to a more reasonable cash rate, discount rate, now you're at $1 billion. But you know, we've lined up several miracles in a row here that aren't going to happen. And so now if you say, we're going to double our launch rate every year, and so I don't know what you end up by 8 years, you're launching 400 times a year or something crazy like that. Okay, now you're starting to get to a return, but that is crazy. You would be crazy to buy into those assumptions. And so anyway, the point of this whole thing is that there are lots of companies out there that are massively overvalued, and at some point that's going to deflate. And when it deflates, a lot of people are going to lose money. And this is not an unheard of phenomenon in industries. And what I don't really know is how different this phenomenon is in this industry compared to other industries with their overvaluations. It's one of the things where I'm trying to figure out in these studies, but it worries me. It worries me when you see these kinds of valuations. So, is it a bubble or is it real? And I don't have a picture of me looking this goofy, but I'll tell you, I don't know. What I will tell you is these are the things that I want to see. I would like to see seeds of order. And what I see, and what I'm talking about there is maybe more rationality to market segmentation and things like this. I would like to see things like customer-oriented companies developing space applications, as I discussed before. I would also like to see fewer firms trying to enter the market and fewer firms having a very harsh exit to the market. You know, I was just looking at something in suborbital tourism, and you know, we started out with a bunch of companies there. We have one company clearly in the suborbital tourism market, Virgin Galactic, and Blue Eye, ostensibly in that industry. I don't know for how long, but you know, there were probably 5 or 6 players in there before. So I would like to see something a little bit more normalized in the industry. Fewer firms coming in and going out. I think this is probably the most important thing, and I'm starting to see some encouraging signs of more patient capital. I think venture capital struggles on the space hardware side. The levels of investment are too high, the levels of return are too low, and it's really hard to make money. And what happens is when you've got those kind of incentives, then people come out with launch vehicles that claim they're going to launch 50 times a year when there aren't 50 launches a year. And so there are things happening with a few companies, few venture capital companies, different sources of funding. I think the government can be a really, really positive influence in this area. NASA, for one, has done a great deal to be sort of represent more patient capital. And the Air Force and the DoD are starting to contribute as well. So these are encouraging signs, but I would like to see more of that. And as I mentioned just recently, I'd like to see valuations sort of go down rationally rather than what I'm afraid is going to happen, which is there's going to be an awful lot of implosions. And that's a problem when your investors lose a lot of money, they tend not to give you more. And we need money. And then finally, probably the key to this whole thing is I think we need better managers and investments that understand the market better. Because I think a lot of people jump into this business not really understanding that much about the business. And everybody loves space. You grow up as kids. One of the things that I learned running the foundation is that kids grow up they love two things, space and dinosaurs. And they get over dinosaurs by the time they're done with the third grade. And people continue to love space, sometimes irrationally. And so I think we need to be better about this. You know, if I look at what all of you out there are going to face, it's an extraordinarily complex world. It's a complex environment, and it's a complex environment that is moving so much faster than the environment that I grew up in. It's going to be different. It's going to be hard. And I just want to go through quickly some of the forces that you're going to see that are so different from what I saw. Okay, so growing up, my satellites were tons, right? And the technology, if you built an optical satellite, an Earth observation satellite, you had to have huge optics to do this kind of stuff. And you had to have huge antennas to do communications. And we are getting so much better at this. So we built things much, much smaller. And as a consequence, one of the things, the costs have gone way, way down. And as a result of the miniaturization and the costs going down, we're getting many more investors. When I grew up, there were basically three investors. There was NASA, there was the Department of Defense, and there was the commercial satellite industry. And the commercial satellite industry was also super concentrated. You know, you have Intelsat and SES, and between them, they've got well north of 100 spacecraft in space right now. So it was really an oligopoly. But now you've got hundreds of investors, hundreds of different, spacecraft companies that are out there. And so it's just a much more complex financial environment. And these investors, as I mentioned before, are everything from angel capital to long-term debt. And so it's a much different environment. And instead of having the three customers that I mentioned, DoD, NASA, and commercial satellites, we're moving to an environment where you're going to have as many customers as there are economic actors in the world. You look at a company like Planet, and they're literally selling data to insurance company, to agriculture, an array, a diversification of customers that we just couldn't have imagined. And we're only starting to realize that kind of diversification. And as I've said several times, I think that's really where the magic is going to happen. And by the same token, as I mentioned, you got 130 companies out there building small launch vehicles. You've got a dozen companies at least building satellite constellations. It's a hugely competitive environment. And a lot of the market dynamics that I experienced have been completely turned upside down. And maybe, it was always in space. We never really thought there were first mover advantages. I'm starting to think that maybe there are. And it's It's going to be interesting to see. But this is what all of you are going to be able to experience, and it's going to be dramatically different. And I think, you know, you need a different set of skills to do that, which is frankly what drove me and International Space University to create the Center for Space Entrepreneurship. So I'm just going to, I've got a couple of words about the center. So we've got a few different programs. The core of our program is right now a graduate certificate program we teach over the summer. It's 4 courses that are part of the Florida Tech, you know, regular catalog curriculum. So you can take credits from this program and take them to whatever university you're at to support your MBA, your aerospace engineering degree, policy degrees. And so the idea is if you're out there working in aerospace engineering or just classical engineering, you want to learn something about in more depth about space and sort of get a shock of space for a summer. That's what this program does. We're also putting together graduate degree programs and an MBA with an emphasis in commercial space, engineering management with an emphasis in commercial space. We've been doing workshops. We're trying to get started with launch events. The first year, we were only able to do one. This year with COVID, that kind of shot the whole idea. And as I mentioned a couple of times, we've got several research programs that are going now on commercial space, specifically industry emergence in some areas. But the other thing are facilities. And I want to talk in particular about the Ksc Visitor Complex. Now, the first year when we taught the program, we did the entire program in the Visitor Complex. The classroom was literally underneath the Space Shuttle Atlantis. So you'd walk out for your break and you're literally almost underneath the Space Shuttle Atlantis. It was pretty cool. This year we were intending to do, we wanted to do, because of COVID, we're going to do 8 weeks online and then do 2 weeks in Florida. We weren't able to get to Florida. It was the second half of July. Horrible environment there. And so we ended up doing the whole program online, but it was absolutely spectacular. We had students from all over the globe. We had 3 students coming from Africa. I think there were 3 more in Europe, a student from Sri Lanka, students from all over the United States. There were actually only, I think, 2 students from Florida Tech, and it was an incredible group of students coming out of it. We've got 2 groups of students that are actually, you know, the students form into teams and pursue their own business. We've got 2 that are pressing on with their business, getting into incubators. We've got 1 student that's already published a paper. That was one of the papers that he wrote for my class. I've got 2 or 3 more that we're going to try and get published in the New Space Journal. The point is, that's the quality of students that we're getting and the quality of work we're getting out of them. And we've got some other great facilities at Florida Tech with, you know, a great maker space at the Center for Advanced Manufacturing, Innovative Design. And then my office is at the Center for Aerospace Innovation. Anyway, and I mentioned it a little bit, but we've got, I'll get into the faculty in just a second, but this is actually from 2019, students from all of these different universities, students and faculty from all of these different universities. So there are a lot of people from all over the world doing cool stuff involved in the program. And the key to the thing is really, I think, guest lectures. So in 2019, this is our list of guest lectures. CEOs, former CEO of Orbital Sciences, David Thompson. And then there's the faculty. And this year we actually had 27 guest speakers. And one of the great things about going online is we're able to get just a fantastic group of people to come in and talk to us online. And so that's a key part of it, but there's nothing like getting together face-to-face. So we will always retain the face-to-face part of this program. So Ken Davidian from the FAA, he's kind of one of the original gangsters of supporting commercial space in the government. Tremendous talent there. Peter Eckert, who comes to us from the University of Munich. He was also a McKinsey consultant, and he's consulting with the Aldrin Space Institute and brings a great European perspective to what we do. Henry Hertzfeld runs the George Washington University Space Policy Institute, and is our space law expert. Chris Welsh comes from the International Space University, teaches engineering. Angie Buckley was formerly the dean at ISU. She's now at the Aerospace Corporation. She also teaches the technology program. And then there's Greg Gottry, who was recently at University of Southern California. He's now at the Pacific Space Commercialization Initiative, which is going to be part of the Aldrin Space Institute. Greg has also been nominated to be the Chief Financial Officer at NASA. I don't know if that confirmation is actually going to get through before the election. I'll leave it at that. But Greg will be with us sooner, I hope. And then there's me, and you guys know me too much already. So I'm just going to wrap up by saying, in my career in space, whether I was running advanced programs at Boeing or Moon Express or stuff in academia, I noticed that we have a lot of great engineers, but they don't have the skills to really manage and run a company. And so, getting back to my surfing metaphor, I say we have an awful lot of bulldogs trying to surf. And ultimately, this bulldog is gonna get ashore. It's gonna be ugly. He's gonna get ashore. And what we're trying to do with the Center for Space Entrepreneurship is this: we want to create silver surfers, right? And so, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Do we have any questions? I hope. I don't know how much time I took. Wow.
Right.
Probably more than we
Thank you,
expected.
Dr. Aldrin, for that very thought-provoking keynote. I know that
I'm not hearing you.
Are you not able to hear me? Could you please confirm if you can hear my volume?
I shall stop share for one thing.
All right, is that better?
Oh, I know what happened. That's on my end. Sorry about that, Chief.
Okay,
I went on for so long, my sound system shut off. Hold on one second. Okay, we're there.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much for that amazing, thought-provoking keynote. I know that a number of our participants were really looking forward for your keynote. A lot of them are really interested in going into NASA and many space organizations as well. Mm-hmm. So your keynote, I'm sure, has most definitely benefited them. They will also be on our Rocket Chat on the Space Apps website throughout the event this weekend. So if you'd ever like to talk to any of them or share any wisdom with them, you can go there during this weekend. If you could take a few minutes to address—
Absolutely. And Akshan, since I babbled for way too long, I would be happy if you wanted to just set up like an organized Q&A. I'll answer questions now. Happy to do it. I don't, it's Friday afternoon for me. This is the most fun I'm going to have today. So I'm happy to answer questions for as long as you want. But if you want to kind of set up something more formal over the weekend, I'm just going to be here working. So
it's perfectly fine. You can answer the questions now. Let's try to wrap it up at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Okay.
Could you please confirm if you're able to see the questions in the Q&A?
Oh, you want me to pull up the Q&A?
Yeah, the Q&A tab on the webinar.
Okay. Anonymous attendee, how do you and your team handle failures? So that's the toughest part. And it mostly, I mean, first of all, you have to go into this realizing that plan B is going to become plan A in a hurry. And so I think the fundamental thing is you got to let go of, you got to figure out what you did wrong and let go of it. And it's not just ignore it, but if you had, for example, if you figure out that you've got a design approach that isn't going to work, you got to get over it. You got to move to, if you've got a business approach that isn't going to work because fundamentally you don't have customers, and that is the most important thing about any business, is it's got to start with a customer. It starts with a technology that doesn't usually work. But the point is, I think maybe the most important thing is getting over, understanding what the problem was, and figure out the right solution is. But if that solution means changing, you got to accept that. You're going to have to get over it. And that's always a struggle. Okay, next one. Who was your inspiration? Hang on, we just, okay, who was your inspiration? This is, so I mean, there's a professional inspiration, which was probably Sergey Korliov. I mean, because I studied that. There were two other people. One was Mike Collins. You know, he flew with my dad on the mission. He was an inspiration. He still is an inspiration to me because, I mean, all of the astronauts are just super, super competent. But what inspires me about Mike is that he doesn't take himself too seriously. What's important is doing the job and working with people. And it's not, you know, it's not taking himself too seriously. And it's not that, you know, I want to say you shouldn't have an ego, but he inspired me simply because, you know, here is a guy who went to the moon. And he still cared very deeply about everybody that he had a conversation with. So that was one person. The other person was my grandfather, who grew up in the Depression. Literally, the coolest thing he did is you know, in the Depression, you do what you could. He ended up repossessing a car once from a guy who was the middleweight champion of the world, which took a lot of guts. But he had literally went from nothing to running an oil company. And so he was a tremendous inspiration. What were your goals? So, you know, I think the biggest thing for me was I either wanted to run a company or a big business unit or some kind of an academic program. And I tried the company thing, and I got to be an executive, but I'm just not cut out for that whole thing. I enjoyed running a startup company a lot. It's hard work, and I'm not, you know, so that's one of them. So I guess I sort of looked at that and I did it for a while, and it's hard. And so I'm doing what I like doing right now is running a research and teaching organization, because that's sort of one of the things I would say for probably 20 or 30 years I wanted to do. So that, and it's, yeah. What are the goals left yet to be accomplished? You know what? It's when, you know, creating this organization, the Center for Space Entrepreneurship, every day is a new challenge. And you know, we've essentially been in operation now for 2 years. So we're a startup. And so there's a lot to do. But I tell you what, every time I have a student who gets out of the program and has clearer thinking or is thinking more, it really matters a lot to me. I'll tell you something that mattered a lot to me. The first years I had, you know, sort of did a face-to-face with a bunch of students afterwards. And one of the things that really meant a lot to me was a few of the students said, you know, we'd come into class one day and we'd think there's absolutely a commercial revolution in space and it's all going to be great and it's going to happen. And then we come in the next day and go, oh my God, it's never going to happen. The fact is that they were thinking, and that mattered to me. So that's kind of accomplishing a goal on a daily basis. And, you know, at some point, you can in your career make big differences doing big things, and you can make differences doing small things. And for me, both of them are important, but I have to say that the things that really get me are kind of the small things. You know, I've got, you know, like I said, I've got students that are writing great papers that they wrote in our class. I got students that have started businesses now, and that really matters. The people who died in the Challenger, I can't give you all the names. No, I can't. I won't even try because I'll miss all 7 of them. But it's easy to find out. With global teams participation, how do you see space education heading towards, and how do you see the USA playing a role? with Mars exploration? Two really great questions. I'll tell you that I think, I don't want to make it sound like we're on the vanguard of anything, because I think there are a lot of other people that are doing interdisciplinary education. That I think is important. I think one of the things I learned this year is that online education works better in large part because it can be so global. But I'm not going to give up on the importance of face-to-face, getting with people. So ideally, what we're going to do this next year is what we planned to do this last year, which is 8 weeks online, 2 weeks in Florida. And so I think that's kind of the direction. How do you see the USA playing a key role with Mars exploration? Well, so the US is the global leader. And if you kind of spend some time looking at it in space, just as an example, we spend more than the rest of the world combined, as a government, spend more than the rest of the world combined by like 50% almost. And so we are, in so many ways, so far out in front. One of the ways that we're maybe less far out in front is in human spaceflight. And so people tend to look at the fact that, we lost our ability to get to the space station. We were depending on Russia, that China is going to the moon, probably with people before too long. Probably not before us, but, and assume that the US has lost its lead in space. It has not. And remember one of the charts that I showed you where all of the investment in commercial space, not all of it, the vast majority is happening in the United States. The dynamics of the commercial market happening in the United States. I think the commercialization of space, whether it's a revolution or not, is happening in the United States. And that's probably only going to increase US leadership. With respect to Mars, the United States won't go to Mars. Russia won't go to Mars. China won't go to Mars. We will go as a global team. We have to. We just have to. I personally just don't think it's affordable, but there are lots of other reasons. So it is my belief, and more than just my hope, my belief that the US will go there as part of a team to Mars. And that, when you go to Mars, you're there for 2 years. And my belief is, to have a sustaining presence there, you'll end up there because you're going to need 50 people or something. You'll end up staying there for decades. And the people on Mars are going to become Martians. They'll be Martians, and they'll be working together, and they'll have to deal with their home country because they're still going to depend on them for something. But I think that's going to be even more so than the space station, which I think has been an incredible demonstration of the power of space for countries to get along and work together in spite of the challenges of whatever geopolitics there are. So I think Mars is going to be true magic, and I think it would be nothing short of one of the greatest mistakes humanity ever makes if we don't have every country along with us going there. Is that it?
We can do maybe two more.
We got a bunch more. Okay, from your knowledge, do you think NASA currently has the capability to send astronauts to Mars? No. Not that we won't. If you think about it, Mars is affordable financially. Look at it. We spent $100 billion on the space station, more than $100 billion. And we spend $10 billion a year on human spaceflight. If we focus that $10 billion and said, we're going to Mars, and you find that you get the rest of the world to cobble together another $10 billion, which isn't incredible. Especially you get China throw in $3 billion or something like that. Going to Mars is hundreds of billions of dollars. But if you can cobble together 100 billion from the US, another 100 billion from the rest of the world, 200 billion, you got a Mars program. So it can be done financially. There are huge challenges technologically, but I'll tell you, we did some work at the Aldrin Space Institute, a couple of workshops on Mars sustainability. And one of the things that we found was that it's not just technological problems. A lot of it is physiological, not surprising. How do you grow food? And psychological. Those are going to be huge challenges. And we don't have a clue. in a lot of those areas. I think we can solve all the technology with what we got, but it's really hard to understand what a group of people are going to do on Mars if they know that they're going to be there for 10 years, and best case, you know, they're 2 years away from a can of beans, right? That's going to be different, and there isn't any way to look at historical analogs or anything else to simulate something like that. So I think we're going to have to do some pretty sophisticated psychological, sociological, computational modeling to figure out what it's going to take to keep people healthy and happy on Mars. So I have to get this one. Oh no, it's the next one. You mentioned a lot of people and students love space, but mostly they lose interest due to limited options available, and again, and fewer options, space research available. What's your thought? What we can do to change the mindset? So this is my message to all of you. You are all going to have opportunities that no one from my generation ever could have dreamed of. Like I said, look, we have, the foundation is working with a school, a high school in England that's building satellites. They're just the little 2-inch CubeSat things, not even CubeSats, they're just chipsats. But we're trying to put together programs to build CubeSats in high schools. And, you know, as I said, you can build spacecraft for thousands, maybe single-digit millions, and get them into space that do real things. You can create real companies with relatively trivial amounts of money, and that's it, to get something into space. If you're just talking about taking space data and turning it into incredible information products, everyone out there will not have the excuse that it's too expensive or too hard to get involved in space. You just got to get creative, but the costs have just dropped exponentially. The timeframes have dropped exponentially. When I was in grad school, if you wanted to do a mission, and let's just say you started in your first year undergraduate working on a mission, and so you got 4 years undergraduate, let's say 4 years to get your PhD, you're not going to ever see that mission fly. When I was growing up, with all of you guys, you know, you can actually get missions. I mean, today, NASA's doing missions in 2 years, 3 years. When we go forward another couple of years, when we talk about commercial stuff, you know, you can go from idea to actually flying stuff in a year. When I was running Moon Express, we actually built a rocket engine. It was, I don't know, a couple 100 pounds thrust, a small engine, but using different propellants, and no stands, no drawings, no nothing. And I think it was 6 months till we got our first, from flat start to hot fire in less than 6 months. Okay, that's incredible. To, you know, if you go to rocket, nothing against Rocketdyne, but I mean, the traditional way of doing things, it's years and hundreds of millions of dollars, and you can do it in months. So I mean, you all have the opportunity to participate in space the way no one ever did. And so, you know, I think you all, it's there in front of you, and it's, you know, it's going to be a challenge to figure out. I think the real challenge isn't going to be how can you build space hardware. The real challenge for all of you is how can you find somebody to buy it. Buy not the hardware. Nobody cares about the hardware except the astronauts. The only thing that matters is what's the data coming back from space, right? What's real social utility, something that you could sell from space. And so it's got to be customer driven. What's my best advice to succeed? 2 things. 1, be flexible. As I said before, don't be afraid to change. And 2, follow the customer. Find out who the customer is. Follow them, figure out what they understand. And it's not just understanding an individual. You need to understand the breadth of the whole industry, because, you know, when you're out there looking for investment money, investors don't really care about the product or technology you have right now, typically, because they know chances are it's not going to work the first time out. they care about two things. They care about the people. Are they dedicated? Are they talented? The other thing they care about is the market and how well the people know the market. And it's not just who's buying. It's like the whole breadth of the market. What do the supply chains look like? What does finance look like? What are the dynamics of the market? Are you getting into a high growth early market? You know, you need to understand the world that you live in. It's not technology. It's much broader than that. So that's my advice. Do we have more?
I'm afraid we only have enough time to answer one more question.
I think that's all I've got. What do you know? Did space exploration slow down to achieve the 2020 goals? Oh, absolutely. Not as much as I thought going into it. And most of the people I know that are out there with real jobs are still working and they're still producing things. But there's no doubt it's going to slow us down a little. I mean, look, there are great managers out there, and if you really poke them and say, what's your schedule look like now? You know, they'll say it's pushed out. And everybody's afraid to publicly admit that, but I have no doubt you're going to see lots of schedules move out, but not that badly. Not that badly. It hasn't, you know, we've been performing remarkably well, if you think about it. You know, there haven't been huge drop-offs in launch rates. SpaceX is still launching like, every other day now. So it's happening, but it's not that bad. We are being far more resilient than I would have expected. Okay, well, listen, all of you, Akshan, first of all, thank you for having me here. I love doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and joining us to bestow your, to inspire all of these participants that are here today. I'm sure that they'll all use what you told them in today's keynote to help them try to make their project look in the best way possible. So when the judges see it, they'll feel like they'll be blown away, basically.
Okay. And listen, you can all get in touch with me at aldrin@fit.edu.
Okay.
There you have it. Okay. How many people did I just give my email address to?
We have some participants on the Zoom webinar, and we also have some participants watching on external sites like our Facebook and on our YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
So you have a great number of people must have been really interested by your keynote.
I hope I get emails from all of them. All right. All right, everybody, listen, good luck. Have a great time, have fun, and don't forget about the customer.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Aldrin. So that wraps up today's event, special event for today. Tomorrow you will be able to meet two more. Today you met two of our amazing keynote speakers. Tomorrow you will be able to meet our amazing Women in STEAM panel. And they will also tell you amazing tips and more information on how you can exceed in this competition and as a whole on your life journey. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us on the Rocket Chat or at our email at spaceappsvirginia@gmail.com. And I hope this officially kicks off our Space Apps McLean. And I hope you have a great day.